You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building. He is the Georgia NAACP Vice President and also a civil rights attorney, Gerald Griggs. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. What's going on, y'all?
Good morning, my brother.
Morning.
We ready to vote?
Yes, all day long.
Stacey Abrams. Let's get her in office. Let's talk about it.
Well, we got a lot going on. We have unprecedented voter turnout. We've had over 1 million and 1.1 million vote already. So a good voter turnout. But we have the suppressor in chief, Brian Kemp, who's trying everything that he can to keep 53,000 new registrants from voting, and 700,000 have been purged. So we got a lot of work to do.
Why is nobody saying or doing anything about this conflict of interest? Like, Brian Kemp is what?
He's the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, and he's running for governor, so he's in charge of the votes?
It should be so illegal.
I believe it's illegal and unethical, but the problem is, there are no laws on the books to stop this. So we've called for his resignation numerous times, and right now we're just mobilizing the votes to see if we can make sure this never happens again.
That is crazy. Explain that in depth, because he controls everything. So pretty much he could slide it any way he wants, and nobody could say anything because he's...
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he's the chief executive officer over the election. He presides over the election. So, right. I mean, it's clearly a conflict. Mm-hmm. We've tried everything, including former President Jimmy Carter writing a letter to him strongly requesting that he resign. But the current governor is not doing anything. So we have to make sure we show up at the polls.
Let's talk about voter suppression. What are the reasons why they're saying that they can purge these votes and why people can't vote? And what can you do if it happens to you?
Well, they have the exact match system, which basically says if your name does not match the names on your license, your birth certificate, any type of irregularities, your signature, you should not be able to vote.
Wow, so they can just say your signature doesn't match. Or let's say you have your middle initial on your ID, but it's not on your voter registration card. They can say that's not an exact match?
Exactly. And so he's been doing this since 2012. 1.5 million people have been removed. So we've sued him 6 times. We've won 5 times, including this temporary restraining order that prevents him from using it in this election. So what people can do is check, make sure you have all your identifying information, your passport, your driver's license, and ask for a provisional ballot. They tell you that you cannot vote, because you can vote and then bring in the appropriate identification 3 days later to make sure your vote counts. But you can vote.
So when it comes to voter suppression, as long as people come out in mass and vote for Miss
Stacey Abrams,
she'll still become governor. Like, they can't, I vote, you go buy a movie ticket and it's supposed to be a Tyler Perry film, but then they give you something else. Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, so they don't count towards Tyler's box office?
Well, they have something called voter flipping. Basically, the machines are flipping the votes from one candidate to another. We've also filed 4 complaints on that. But if we make sure we show up the way we need to show up, there are 3 million black African-American Georgians, okay? If we all show up, the last race was decided by 200,000 votes. So if we show up and vote, it's not going to be close. There's going to be a win. But we have to make sure we turn out. So to answer your question, we just got to get out, man.
So if we see a large African-American voter turnout, but for whatever reason it's all accounted to Brian Kemp, then something's wrong.
Something's seriously wrong, and we will file suit again. I mean, we all know that if it's not close or it's not going a certain way, then something happens.
Now, when you say you sue, you won 4 out of 5.
Yes.
When you sue, what does winning in that lawsuit mean?
Winning means placing people back on the rolls. Like I said, he's removed 1.5 million. We sued last year to put 300,000 back on the roll. So that's what we're doing, making sure people have access to the franchise and that they're not being disenfranchised or suppressed. But he's doing it at a rate that's astronomical, so we're having to stay in federal court against him.
He should be disappointed in himself. Like, this is what his legacy is going to be: losing and then having to be that person that was actually stopping people from voting and trying to make sure that he wins. That's what his legacy is going to be.
He don't care about black people. He don't care what black people do.
His legacy will be being the voter suppressor in chief. He's the modern day. He's the modern day governor, like George Wallace was in Alabama. So that's his legacy. But hopefully people will show up. So we cannot allow this to happen anymore.
Let's be clear. It's not the first time this has happened. This happens all the time throughout the history of America. even in presidential elections. So it's not like they used to stealing elections.
I mean, yeah, 2000 Bush versus Gore to hanging Chad. I mean, that was clear.
They announced Gore as the president.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, this last election, we're not going to get into that 2016, and we still have some issues with that one. So
the Bush Gore one is very important because it's like they announced Gore as the president. Then it was like, no. And then everything came down to Florida, who was the governor of Florida at the time.
George
Bush's
Bush's
brother.
brother, yes.
It's like, come on, man.
Which is crazy because he's the man that oversees the elections, right, in Georgia.
Yes.
But then he's also the man that's making sure that people can't vote.
Yes.
Now, I see a lot of people coming out in support of Stacey Abrams. I saw Will Ferrell even was out.
Yeah, he was down there
and
this
about,
weekend. Yes.
That's
very funny guy.
Tell, we're feeling like the crunch right now because it's like you have to make sure you get out and vote because sometimes people assume, oh, well, my vote doesn't count or it doesn't even matter.
We got this anyway.
Yeah, if I go, we're going to win anyway. We see all the attention that she's getting, but it is important to still go out and vote and not just assume that something's going to happen without your support.
No, you have to show up. You have to make sure you cast your ballot. Listen, every vote is going to count. The last gubernatorial election came down to 200,000 votes. So we need every single vote. It's a neck-and-neck race. Don't believe the polls. Just make sure that you cast your ballot in the only poll that matters, and that's on November the 6th. Early voting is from today all the way to November the 2nd. We need every single voter out there.
How do we hold Democrats accountable once they're in the White House?
The same way we hold anybody else accountable. We show up. We make sure we're at town halls. We make sure we're at the votes whenever they're having legislation that's on the table. And we make sure we show up at their office and make sure they push the agenda we want. Because we see with this particular administration, they are delivering for their base. Mm-hmm. So it's time for Democrats to deliver for their base.
Which is black people. Black people are 90% loyal to Democrats.
Of course.
And we have to make our demands, too.
What is it that we want? That's the other problem I have.
Well, we want criminal justice reform. We want jobs. We want our communities to be looked at in the same manner. We want our dollar respected.
Women's rights.
Of course, women's rights. We want to make sure nobody's trying to take away our right to vote. And we want to make sure we get criminal justice reform. We want some of the brothers that are in there unjustly to be released and the others to have fair and equitable criminal justice system so we don't see just mass numbers of African-American men and African-American women locked up. So it's a lot of things.
More money spent in education.
Of course, of course. Our schools need to have the same resources as anybody else's school so that you start out on even playing field so that the cream can rise to the top. So we want all those things. Those things should be on the agenda for any party that wants our vote.
Why can't black Democrats speak towards African-American rights? Meaning, like, they'll tell you, we need LGBT rights, transgender rights, immigration rights, but you never hear them say we need African-American rights.
And I think the new breed of Democrat, the new breed of elected official needs to speak directly to that.
Yes.
You need to speak to your base, and you need to be clear and unapologetic in your demands. We can champion other people's rights, but we need to champion ours first,
yes.
And we need to make sure that it comes into our community the way that our community has been turning out to vote. Because it's very hard for me to tell people to vote, and then the next thing I know, the person they go vote for doesn't come see the community again for another 4 years.
That's all I'm saying.
That's what we got to do, brother. I agree with you.
Because I just feel like we just got such a blind loyalty to the Democrats, and it's like we got to start holding them accountable for our community.
Well, again, NAACP is nonpartisan, so I think that we need to hold every elected official, especially the ones that say they represent us, to making sure our agenda is put first. Again, we can talk about everybody else's rights, but when it comes down to it, we need to make sure we see results in our community. I'm tired of seeing memes that say the hood after Nixon, the hood after Carter, the hood after Obama, the hood after Trump, and it all looks the same.
That's real.
We need to change some things, and we need to make sure we hold those elected officials accountable.
Did you see Kanye West design these Blexit shirts?
Listen, Kanye needs to sit down, and he can. I'm saying it right here. He needs to sit down. He needs to allow the professionals to do what they do, to talk about politics, and to hold that administration accountable. Because, again, they're the ones funding private prisons. They're the ones that are trying to get national stop and frisk. So if Kanye wants to have a conversation with President Trump, that's the conversation he needs to have. Not talking about black people need to walk away from any plantation. We're not on any plantation. But what we do need is real economic opportunities, real educational reform, real criminal justice reform. So if you want to talk about black people walking off the plantation, go talk to him about those changes, and then we'll have that conversation.
I don't even know why we focus on that. Like, it's a distraction. Like,
who
cares? Like, okay, Kanye, West, Candace, they chose a side. Cool. Now, you know what we should be doing? Empowering our side, encouraging our side to go out there and vote. And then once we get these people in office, holding them accountable.
I agree, and that's why we took 6 busloads to vote yesterday. So when Kanye starts showing up to the polls with voters, then we'll talk about Kanye. But right now we're trying to motivate the vote. That's a good point.
He didn't even vote.
But then he's telling people not to be Democrats.
Well, like I said,
because it's an emotionally abusive relationship.
13 mail bombs, 2 African Americans that have been assassinated in Kentucky, and then the synagogue that happened in Pittsburgh. Talk about that, Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not telling black people to be anything other than black. I'm not telling them to be Democrats. I'm not telling them to be Republicans. But I am telling them whoever we vote for, hold them accountable for our issues. We don't do a good job of that at all.
That's true. We let them show up every 4 years. They make some promises, and then we see them again in 4 years. That needs to stop. I believe in this political climate, we're going to hold them accountable.
Right.
And it starts the day after the election. You're not going to go back and go to business as usual. You're not going to be pushing another agenda. We're going to hold you accountable, and we've been doing that.
And we have to make sure we get more involved with politics.
Definitely.
Just even locally, making sure that if there's issues that we have with entrepreneurships in our neighborhood, with anything wrong, we have to speak up about it. A lot of times people complain about what's not being done, but they're also not making any demands or saying what needs to be done. So how can you complain that nothing's being done when you're not doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to city council meeting like we're doing in Atlanta with this Gulch project, if you're not going to your state legislature for their hearings, but when they have bills on the floor, then you don't really know what's going on.
Right.
I think we have to become more involved. If we know what happened in the World Series, we should also know what's happening at the Gold Dome.
People don't even know when their local city council meeting is.
Well, usually in Atlanta, it's at the first Tuesday of the month. So, you know, it's all online. You can go online. You can Google it.
When is it in Brooklyn?
Do your Googles. I mean, listen, I'm just saying that people just need to be more responsible. I'll Google it and see. I'm making sure that I go out and vote. And I'm not complaining about the Democratic Party and telling people not to be Democrats because it's an emotionally abusive relationship.
None of us are telling people not to be Democrats, but we're just saying we got to hold the Democratic Party accountable, especially being that we're so loyal to them. 90% of black people have been voting for them for years. We got to start holding them accountable. It's just that simple.
And I mean, it's more than just, as much as I give my ancestors credit for fighting and dying for that most sacred of rights, it's also about going to vote because we want better schools.
Right.
Yep.
We want less jails. We want to make sure that there are business opportunities in all neighborhoods, especially African Americans. And some people won't legalize marijuana, which is on the ballot in Georgia.
And then make sure that we're involved in
Exactly.
actually financially profiting from when marijuana is legal.
Exactly. And we make sure that the individuals who are already in that trade before it was legalized have their records expunged and clean, and they get an opportunity to continue in that business when it's now legal.
I think it's like, see what's important to you and then actually support those things and support other people being aware of them. Like if you're concerned about entrepreneurship, right? We have the small business services in New York. You can go there and get all kinds of help for free, but spread the word, spread the knowledge, and let other people know what's going on. If education is something that you feel like is suffering, then you need to make sure that you go to those school board meetings and figure out what you could do there.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it affects you, it affects other people.
We just have to educate ourselves. We have to be more politically active. It's not that difficult. You know, they use a lot of big words, but when you break it down, it's about bettering your neighborhood, bettering your community, and making sure you hold the decision makers accountable. That's basically what politics is about. It's real simple once you break it down into its intricate parts.
It's called democracy.
Democracy in action. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gerald. So what should they be doing right now? You said early voting is
Early
going on?
voting is going on until November the 2nd, and then we have the election day, November the 6th. Please, 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 make sure you get out. Make sure you vote. It's your voice, your vote. This is the most important election we've had ever. And everything that you have issues with, education, criminal justice reform, healthcare, they're all on the ballot. So we need to get out.
Yeah.
We need to turn out.
My other question is, so imagine we all go out and vote, and it doesn't turn out the way we want. Then what do we do?
Then we're going to continue to protest. We're going to continue to elevate our voices. We're going to hold whoever's elected accountable to the people, because once you're elected, you represent all the people, not just one side. So I'm hopeful that it will turn out the way we want it to turn out, but if it doesn't, we're just going to elevate our voices even more and hold them accountable.
Because one thing you said that made a lot of sense. You said, you know, you're tired of telling people to vote, and then the people we put in office don't do anything for us. And that's why I think people are so discouraged about voting now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think, you know, regardless of the party, like I said, we're going to be at city council meetings. We're going to be at state legislature hearings and meetings and votes. And we're going to make sure that our elected officials reflect us. Whichever party wins, whichever candidate wins, they need to understand that gone are the days we vote for you and then we don't see you. We're going to show up where you are and make sure we hold you accountable.
That's real.
Even if your party doesn't win, you should still make sure that you show up.
Yes.
And make your demands.
All day long.
It's Gerald Griggs, The Breakfast Club. Thank you for coming, brother.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you.